I think for sure, seeing what larger versions can do is one direction. Also, I mean, there are many questions. There's one question which I'm curious about, and that's the following. So right now, GPT-2, so we feed it all this data from the internet, which means that it needs to memorize all those random facts about everything in the internet. And it would be nice if the model could somehow use its own intelligence to decide what data it wants to accept and what data it wants to reject. Just like people don't learn all data indiscriminately. We are super selective about what we learn. And I think this kind of active learning, I think, would be very nice to have.
Yeah, listen, I love active learning. So let me ask, does the selection of data, can you just elaborate that a little bit more? Do you think the selection of data is like I have this kind of sense that the optimization of how you select data, so the active learning process, is going to be a place for a lot of breakthroughs, even in the near future, because there hasn't been many breakthroughs there that are public. I feel like there might be private breakthroughs that companies keep to themselves, because it's a fundamental problem that has to be solved if you want to solve self-driving, if you want to solve a particular task. But what do you think about the space in general?
Yeah, so I think that for something like active learning, or in fact for any kind of capability like active learning, the thing that it really needs is a problem. It needs a problem that requires it. It's very hard to do research about the capability if you don't have a task, because then what's going to happen is that you will come up with an artificial task, get good results, but not really convince anyone.
Right. Like we're now past the stage where getting result on MNIST, some clever formulation of MNIST will convince people.
That's right. In fact, you could quite easily come up with a simple active learning scheme on MNIST and get a 10x speed up. But then, so what? And I think that with active learning, active learning will naturally arise as problems that require it pop up. That's my take on it.
There's another interesting thing that OpenAI has brought up with GPT-2, which is when you create a powerful artificial intelligence system, and it was unclear what kind of detrimental, once you release GPT-2, what kind of detrimental effect it will have. Because if you have a model that can generate pretty realistic text, you can start to imagine that, it would be used by bots in some way that we can't even imagine. So like there's this nervousness about what is possible to do. So you did a really kind of brave and I think profound thing, which is started a conversation about this. Like, how do we release powerful artificial intelligence models to the public? If we do at all, how do we privately discuss with other, even competitors, about how we manage the use of the systems and so on? So from this whole experience, you released a report on it, but in general, are there any insights that you've gathered from just thinking about this, about how you release models like this?
I mean, I think that my take on this is that the field of AI has been in a state of childhood, and now it's exiting that state and it's entering a state of maturity. What that means is that AI is very successful and also very impactful. And its impact is not only large, but it's also growing. And so for that reason, it seems wise to start thinking about the impact of our systems before releasing them, maybe a little bit too soon rather than a little bit too late. And with the case of GPT-2, like I mentioned earlier, the results really were stunning. And it seemed plausible. It didn't seem certain. It seemed plausible that something like GPT-2 could easily use to reduce the cost of disinformation. And so there was a question of what's the best way to release it, and a staged release seemed logical. A small model was released, and there was time to see many people use these models in lots of cool ways. There have been lots of really cool applications. There haven't been any negative application that we know of. And so eventually it was released. But also other people replicated similar models.
That's an interesting question, though, that we know of. So in your view, staged release is at least part of the answer to the question of what do we do once we create a system like this?
It's part of the answer, yes.
Is there any other insights? Like, say you don't want to release the model at all because it's useful to you for whatever the business is.
Well, there are plenty of people don't release models already.
Right, of course. But is there some moral, ethical responsibility when you have a very powerful model to sort of communicate? Like, just as you said, when you had GPT-2, it was unclear how much it could be used for misinformation. It's an open question. And getting an answer to that might require that you talk to other really smart people that are outside of your particular group. Please tell me there's some optimistic pathway for people across the world to collaborate on these kinds of cases? Or is it still really difficult from one company to talk to another company?
So it's definitely possible. It's definitely possible to discuss these kind of models with colleagues elsewhere and to get their take on what to do.
How hard is it though?
I mean,
do you see that happening?
I think that's a place where it's important to gradually build trust between companies, because ultimately all the AI developers are building technology which is going to be increasingly more powerful. And so it's the way to think about it is that ultimately we all need together.
Yeah, it's I tend to believe in the better angels of our nature, but I do hope that that when you build a really powerful AI system in a particular domain, that you also think about the potential negative consequences of it's an interesting and scary possibility that there would be a race for AI development that would push people to close that development and not share ideas with others.
I don't love this. I've been a pure academic for 10 years. I really like sharing ideas, and it's fun. It's exciting.
What do you think it takes let's talk about AGI a little bit. What do you think it takes to build a system of human level intelligence? We talked about reasoning. We talked about long-term memory, but in general, what does it take, you think?
Well, I can't be sure, but I think that deep learning plus maybe another small idea.
Do you think self-play will be involved? Sort of like you've spoken about the powerful mechanism of self-play where systems learn by sort of exploring the world in a competitive setting against other entities that are similarly skilled as them, and so incrementally improve in this way. Do you think self-play will be a component of building an AGI system?
Yeah. So what I would say to build AGI, I think it's going to be deep learning plus some ideas. And I think self-play will be one of those ideas. I think that is a very... Self-play has this amazing property that it can surprise us in truly novel ways. For example, pretty much every self-play system, both our DotaBot, I don't know if OpenAI had a release about multi-agent where you had two little agents who were playing hide and seek, and of course also AlphaZero. They were all produced surprising behaviors. They all produce behaviors that we didn't expect. They are creative solutions to problems. And that seems like an important part of AGI that our systems don't exhibit routinely right now. And so that's why I like this area. I like this direction because of its ability to surprise us.
And an AGI system would surprise us fundamentally.
Yes, and to be precise, not just a random surprise, but to find a surprising solution to a problem that's also useful.
Right. Now, a lot of the self-play mechanisms have been used in the game context, or at least in the simulation context. How far along the path to AGI do you think will be done in simulation? How much faith, promise do you have in simulation versus having to have a system that operates in the real world, whether it's the real world of digital real world data or real world like actual physical world with robotics?
I don't think it's an either or. I think simulation is a tool and it helps. It has certain strengths and certain weaknesses, and we should use it.
Yeah, but okay, I understand that. That's true. But one of the criticisms of self-play, one of the criticisms of reinforcement learning is one of the its current power, its current results, while amazing, have been demonstrated in a simulated environments or very constrained physical environments. Do you think it's possible to escape them, escape the simulated environments and be able to learn in non-simulated environments? Or do you think it's possible to also just simulate in a photorealistic and physics realistic way the real world in a way that we can solve real problems with self-play in simulation?
So I think that transfer from simulation to the real world is definitely possible and has been exhibited many times by many different groups. It's been especially successful in vision. Also, OpenAI in the summer has demonstrated a robot hand which was trained entirely in simulation in a certain way that allowed for sim to real transfer to occur.
Is this for the Rubik's Cube?
Yeah, that's right. And so
I wasn't aware that was trained in simulation.
It was trained in simulation entirely.
Really? So it wasn't in the physical, the hand wasn't trained?
No. 100% of the training was done in simulation. And the policy that was learned in simulation was trained to be very adaptive. So adaptive that when you transfer it, it could very quickly adapt to the physical world.
So the kind of perturbations with the giraffe or whatever the heck it was, were those part of the simulation?
Well, the simulation was generally, so the simulation was trained to be robust to many different things, but not the kind of perturbations we've had in the video. So it's never been trained with a glove. It's never been trained with a stuffed giraffe.
So in theory, these are novel perturbations.
Correct. It's not in theory, in practice.
That those are novel perturbations. Well, that's okay. That's a clean, small scale but clean example of a transfer from the simulated world to the physical world.
Yeah, and I will also say that I expect the transfer capabilities of deep learning to increase in general, and the better the transfer capabilities are, the more useful simulation will become. Because then you could experience something in simulation and then learn a moral of the story, which you could then carry with you to the real world.
Right.
As humans do all the time when they play computer games.
So let me ask sort of an embodied question, staying on AGI for a sec. Do you think AGI system would need to have a body? We need to have some of those human elements of self-awareness, consciousness, sort of fear of mortality, sort of self-preservation in the physical space, which comes with having a body?
I think having a body will be useful. I don't think it's necessary. But I think it's very useful to have a body for sure, because you can learn a whole new... You can learn things which cannot be learned without a body. But at the same time, I think that you can, if you don't have a body, you could compensate for it and still succeed.
You think so?
Yes. Well, there is evidence for this. For example, there are many people who were born deaf and blind, and they were able to compensate for the lack of modalities. I'm thinking about Helen Keller specifically.
So even if you're not able to physically interact with the world, and if you're not able to... I mean, I actually was getting at... Maybe let me ask on the more particular... I'm not sure if it's connected to having a body or not, but the idea of consciousness, and a more constrained version of that is self-awareness. Do you think an AGI system should have consciousness? We can't define whatever the heck you think consciousness is.
Yeah, hard question to answer, given how hard it is to define it.
Do you think it's useful to think about?
I mean, it's definitely interesting. It's fascinating. I think it's definitely possible that our systems will be conscious.
Do you think that's an emergent thing that just comes from... Do you think consciousness could emerge from the representation that's stored within neural networks? So like that, it naturally just emerges when you become more and more... You're able to represent more and more of the world?
Well, I'd make the following argument, which is humans are conscious, and if you believe that artificial neural nets are sufficiently similar to the brain, then there should at least exist artificial neural nets who should be conscious too.
You're leaning on that existence proof pretty heavily. Okay.
But that's the best answer I can give.
No, I know. There's still an open question if there's not some magic in the brain that we're not... I mean, I don't mean a non-materialistic magic, but that the brain might be a lot more complicated and interesting than we give it credit for.
If that's the case, then it should show up, and at some point we will find out that we can't continue to make progress. But I think it's unlikely.
So we talk about consciousness, but let me talk about another poorly defined concept of intelligence. Again, we've talked about reasoning, we've talked about memory. What do you think is a good test of intelligence for you? Are you impressed by the test that Alan Turing formulated with the imitation game with natural language? Is there something in your mind that you would be deeply impressed by if a system was able to do?
I mean, lots of things. There is a certain frontier of capabilities today.
Yes.
And there exist things outside of that frontier. And I would be impressed by any such thing. Like, for example, I would be impressed by a deep learning system which solves a very pedestrian task like machine translation or computer vision task or something which never makes mistake a human wouldn't make under any circumstances. I think that is something which have not yet been demonstrated, and I would find it very impressive.
Yeah, so right now they make mistakes they might be more accurate than human beings, but they make a different set of mistakes.
So I would guess that a lot of the skepticism that some people have about deep learning is when they look at their mistakes and they say, well, those mistakes, they make no sense. Like, if you understood the concept, you wouldn't make that mistake.
Yes.
And I think that changing that would inspire me. That would be, yes, this is progress.
Yeah, that's a really nice way to put it. But I also just don't like that human instinct to criticize a model is not intelligent. That's the same instinct as we do when we criticize any group of creatures as the other. Because it's very possible that GPT-2 is much smarter than human beings at many things.
That's definitely true. It has a lot more breadth of knowledge.
Yes, breadth of knowledge, and even perhaps depth on certain topics.
It's kind of hard to judge what depth means, but there's definitely a sense in which humans don't make mistakes that these models do.
Yes. The same is applied to autonomous vehicles. The same is probably going to continue being applied to a lot of artificial intelligence systems. We find this is the annoying thing. This is the process of, in the 21st century, the process of analyzing the progress of AI is the search for one case where the system fails in a big way where humans would not. And then many people writing articles about it. And then broadly the public generally gets convinced that the system is not intelligent. And we pacify ourselves by thinking it's not intelligent because of this one anecdotal case. And this seems to continue happening.
Yeah, I mean, there is truth to that. Although I'm sure that plenty of people are also extremely impressed by the system that exists today. But I think this connects to the earlier point we discussed, that it's just confusing to judge progress in AI.
Yeah.
And, you have a new robot demonstrating something. How impressed should you be? And I think that people will start to be impressed once AI starts to really move the needle on the GDP.
So you're one of the people that might be able to create an AGI system here. Not you, but you and OpenAI. If you do create an AGI system and you get to spend sort of the evening with it, him, her, what would you talk about, do you think?
The very first time?
First time.
Well, the first time I would just ask all kinds of questions and try to get it to make a mistake, and I would be amazed that it doesn't make mistakes, and I'd just keep asking broad.
What kind of questions do you think? Would they be factual, or would they be personal, emotional, psychological? What do you think?
All of the above.
Would you ask for advice?
Definitely. I mean, why would I limit myself talking to a system like this?
Now, again, let me emphasize the fact that you truly are one of the people that might be in the room where this happens. So let me ask a sort of a profound question about, I've just talked to a Stalin historian. I've been talking to a lot of people who are studying power. Abraham Lincoln said, "Nearly all men can stand adversity, but if you want to test a man's character, give him power." I would say the power of the 21st century, maybe the 22nd, but hopefully the 21st, would be the creation of an AGI system, and the people who have control, direct possession and control of the AGI system. So what do you think, after spending that evening having a discussion with the AGI system, what do you think you would do?
Well, the ideal world I'd like to imagine is one where humanity are like the board members of a company where the AGI is the CEO. So it would be, I would like, the picture which I would imagine is you have some kind of different entities, different countries or cities, and the people that live there vote for what the AGI that represents them should do, and then the AGI that represents them goes and does it. I think a picture like that I find very appealing. And you could have multiple AGI. You would have an AGI for a city, for a country, and it would be trying to, in effect, take the democratic process to the next level.
And the board can always fire the CEO.
Essentially, press the reset button,
Press the reset button.
Re-randomize the parameters.
But let me sort of, that's actually, okay, that's a beautiful vision, I think, as long as it's possible to press the reset button. Do you think it will always be possible to press the reset button?
So I think that it's definitely will be possible to build. So you're talking. So the question that I really understand from you is, will humans or humans, people have control over the AI systems that they build?
Yes.
And my answer is, it's definitely possible to build AI systems which will want to be controlled by their humans.
Wow, that's part of their. So it's not that just they can't help but be controlled, but they exist. One of the objectives of their existence is to be controlled.
In the same way that human parents generally want to help their children, they want their children to succeed. It's not a burden for them. They are excited to help the children and to feed them and to dress them and to take care of them. And I believe, with high conviction, that the same will be possible for an AGI. It will be possible to program an AGI, to design it in such a way that it will have a similar deep drive that it will be delighted to fulfill. And the drive will be to help humans flourish.
But let me take a step back to that moment where you create the AGI system. I think this is a really crucial moment. And between that moment and the democratic board members with the AGI at the head, there has to be a relinquishing of power. So as George Washington, despite all the bad things he did, one of the big things he did is he relinquished power. He, first of all, didn't want to be president. And even when he became president, he didn't keep just serving as most dictators do for indefinitely. Do you see yourself being able to relinquish control over an AGI system, given how much power you can have over the world? At first, financial, just make a lot of money, right? And then control by having possession of this AGI system.
I'd find it trivial to do that. I'd find it trivial to relinquish this kind of power. I mean, the kind of scenario you are describing sounds terrifying to me. That's all. I would absolutely not want to be in that position.
Do you think you represent the majority or the minority of people in the AI community?
Well, I mean,
it's an open question, an important one. Are most people good is another way to ask it.
So I don't know if most people are good, but I think that when it really counts, people can be better than we think.
That's beautifully put. Yeah. Are there specific mechanisms you can think of aligning AI agent values to human values? Do you think about these problems of continued alignment as we develop the AI systems?
Yeah, definitely. In some sense, the kind of question which you are asking is, so if I were to translate the question to today's terms,
yes,
it would be a question about how to get an RL agent that's optimizing a value function which itself is learned. And if you look at humans are like that because the reward function, the value function of humans is not external, it is internal.
That's right.
And there are definite ideas of how to train a value function, basically an objective, an as objective as possible perception system that will be trained separately to recognize, to internalize human judgments on different situations. And then that component would then be integrated as the base value function for some more capable RL system. You could imagine a process like this. I'm not saying this is the process, I'm saying this is an example of the kind of thing you could do.
So on that topic of the objective functions of human existence, what do you think is the objective function that's implicit in human existence? What's the meaning of life?
Oh, I think the question is wrong in some way. I think that the question implies that there is an objective answer, which is an external answer. Your meaning of life is X.
Right.
I think what's going on is that we exist, and that's amazing. And we should try to make the most of it and try to maximize our own value and enjoyment of our very short time while we do exist.
It's funny because action does require an objective function. It's definitely there in some form, but it's difficult to make it explicit and maybe impossible to make it explicit, I guess is what you're getting at. And that's an interesting fact of an RL environment.
Well, but I was making a slightly different point, is that humans want things, and their wants create the drives that cause them to, our wants are our objective functions, our individual objective functions. We can later decide that we want to change, that what we wanted before is no longer good and we want something else.
Yeah, but they're so dynamic. There's got to be some underlying sort of Freud. Thinks there's like sexual stuff. There's people who think it's the fear of death, and there's also the desire for knowledge, and all these kinds of things. Procreation, the sort of all the evolutionary arguments. It seems to be there might be some kind of fundamental objective function from which everything else emerges. But it seems like that's very difficult to make
I think that probably is an evolutionary objective function, which is to survive and procreate and make your children succeed. That would be my guess. But it doesn't give an answer to the question of what's the meaning of life. I think you can see how humans are part of this big process, this ancient process. We exist on a small planet, and that's it. So, given that we exist, try to make the most of it and try to enjoy more and suffer less as much as we can.
Let me ask 2 silly questions about life. 1, do you have regrets? Moments that if you went back, you would do differently? And 2, are there moments that you're especially proud of that made you truly happy?
So I can answer that. I can answer both questions. Of course, there's a huge number of choices and decisions that I've made that, with the benefit of hindsight, I wouldn't have made them. And I do experience some regret, but, I try to take solace in the knowledge that at the time I did the best I could. And in terms of things that I'm proud of, I'm very fortunate to have done things I'm proud of. And they made me happy for some time, but I don't think that is the source of happiness.
So your academic accomplishments, all the papers, you're one of the most cited people in the world, all of the breakthroughs I mentioned in computer vision and language and so on. What is the source of happiness and pride for you?
I mean, all those things are a source of pride for sure. I'm very grateful for having done all those things. And it was very fun to do them. But happiness comes, my current view is that happiness comes from to a very large degree from the way we look at things. You can have a simple meal and be quite happy as a result, or you can talk to someone and be happy as a result as well. Or conversely, you can have a meal and be disappointed that the meal wasn't a better meal. So I think a lot of happiness comes from that, but I'm not sure. I don't want to be too confident.
Being humble in the face of the uncertainty seems to be also part of this whole happiness thing. Well, I don't think there's a better way to end it than meaning of life and discussions of happiness. So Ilya, thank you so much. You've given me a few incredible ideas. You've given the world many incredible ideas. I really appreciate it. And thanks for talking today.
Yeah, thanks for stopping by. I really enjoyed it.